oppose as fascist. So the question is, why?
Well, because Democrats used to actually care about the border because the base of the Democrat Party was labor unions. Labor unions know that if you flood the country with just a staggering amount of illegal, cheap labor, it drives down wages for all of the people who are actually legally here. And it makes it much, much harder for union families to get ahead and progress through the system and have a secure future. So the Democrats did all of this. The first major immigration bill that is currently relevant was passed in 1952 by a Democrat House, a Democrat Senate, Democrat President, and it just went on from there. We have passed significant immigration legislation 4 times since 1950. Every one of those was either signed by a Democrat president or passed by a Democrat Congress or both. And of course, leading into the most recent one, which was passed in 1996, Bill Clinton famously gave that State of the Union address where he lays out the case against illegal immigration, possibly better than Donald Trump or Tom Homan or any of those guys. It's really a stunning speech, and the post you're talking about, I clip a snippet from it. Bill Clinton got that his base was unions. Now, you may or may not like unions. That's not the point. The thesis was the same. It is absolutely the case that if you drive up demand, you increase the cost of supply. There is only so much housing to go around. So when Joe Biden lets 10 million people cross the border illegally, and that he lets stay without really any questions, never mind the part where none of them were screened for COVID while the rest of us were being demanded to carry vaccine passports and wear masks and everything else. These guys just walked across the border. Never mind that a lot of them were gang members, which sounds like, no big deal, like West Side Story or something. But we're talking about human traffickers, drug smugglers, and in some cases, paramilitary operators directly sponsored by hostile foreign governments, certainly Venezuela, partly China, several more. And the Iranians, without a doubt, that's been well established. There were no controls on it. They just come. They cause chaos, they kill innocent people here, and all of this could be solved. It's just straight out of the book of Nehemiah. God doesn't condemn having a wall. God just wants people to come through the door. And that's what Nehemiah did. But having a door means that you can check who's coming in. You can make sure that none of the people coming in are going to hurt any of the people who are inside, or to the degree that you can vet people. And it just makes everybody safer. Government's first duty is to keep its own people safe. And if it can't do that, why are we paying all these taxes?
Yeah, good point. Okay, so Rod, Elon Musk and others have posited this reason why they're doing that. So you had this huge flip from Clinton, even Obama. Obama was strong on immigration. We're going to get them out of here. If you say it's immoral. In
fits and starts, but yes, he deported a lot of people.
He did, and he said, you've cut in line, and we're not going to allow that. Okay, so Elon said the only reason they're letting all these people in is they need to have voters, because they don't have enough voters. With people are starting, come out of the ether in a sense, where a lot of Democrats are saying, wait a minute, you're not helping me at all. These inner cities that you've been governing for all these years are disasters. They become garbage dumps and sewer pits. And so Democrats need new voters, so we'll let all these people in, we'll give them all this free stuff, and they'll be voters for life. Agree or disagree with that, with that summation?
Well, it's just painfully obviously true, but it oversimplifies the case. Elon isn't oversimplifying it. That's just one of his assertions. But look, here's the thing. Obama, first time in history, Obama directed the Census Bureau to make no distinction between citizens and non-citizens. So the Census Bureau, when it conducted the 2010 census, and then again in 2020, because Democrats managed to block Trump from doing anything about this in the 2020 census, and then Obama got rid of all the restrictions that he had instituted later. The Census Bureau counted all these illegals. The illegals constitute a significant percentage of the population of a number of states, but most of them blue. Obviously, you've got a significant issue in Texas. We do in Florida. We're making headway on that. That's a lot of the narrative actually in the mid-2010s, where Democrats were talking about how they were going to flip Texas blue. They were counting on all these illegal aliens. But most of the illegal aliens, as you can imagine, are in the sanctuary jurisdictions, which is just, nullification or something. It's back to the future. The Democrats are always trying to thwart federal authority when they're out of federal power and trying to centralize all authority in Washington when they're in. And so, what that ends up doing is it has given California more electoral votes and House seats than it rightly has. Illinois, more electoral votes and House seats than it rightly has. Massachusetts, New York, other places. These states, and Minnesota well on its way, these states have disproportionate, illegitimate power in our system to elect presidents and to pass or stop legislation in the U.S. House of Representatives, because they're using these illegals, and using them is the correct term. They're using these people to increase their share in key institutions. That's before you get to illegal voting. But the truth is, we've proven an awful lot of that too. And the mainstream media wants to pretend that all of that's lies. Well, there's a reason the FBI just raided, and there's a reason we're going after the overwhelming fraud, not just in Minnesota, but in a lot of blue states. There's an entire machine in place to fund these people's existence in a manner that keeps them in jurisdictions that are useful to the Democrat Party to beat you. It's just no different from rigging a football game. If it were a fair game, it would go differently. It's not a fair game, and that's what's got to be stopped.
Okay, so I totally agree, Rod. How come? I know people are frustrated about this, but so you look at the fraud in Minnesota, and knowing that based on the reports, Somalis aren't known for being intellectual geniuses. There's, it's just their IQs are not as a whole. It came out that's not very high. Yet they have this sophisticated fraud network taking place among Somalis. I would think that an honest, fair-minded person would say, you're getting help to do this. Somebody's telling you how to do this. And how come we're not seeing arrests as you go up the chain and say, hey, Jacob Fry, Tim Walz, whoever, you knew about this. And by not stopping it, you're complicit with it. Why aren't we seeing that yet?
Well, because the Democrats benefit from it. But, going back to the Somalis, you don't have to get to IQ to understand the cultural problem. Somalia is a failed state. It has been since the 90s. There is something that calls itself the central government, just as there was for decades in Lebanon. It doesn't really rule anything. There are tribal gangs. They fight each other. Sometimes they come to a bit of stability, like the Five Families and The Godfather. But this is a thugocracy, and everything is corrupt. Every single thing in your life is subject to corruption. at a scale that is just almost incomprehensible for Americans. So this is the thing, and of course the Democrats always want to call racism when you talk about these problems, but there's a reason Africa is poor, and it's not that almost a century ago the British and the French were there. It's that these places have chosen kleptocratic systems of government that none of them are free, meaningfully, just a couple of them. And it's just a catastrophe on the human level. So of course they're right to want to come here. If I were a Somalian, I'd be on the first boat to America too. Don't blame them for that at all, but they should come legally. A lot of these people actually did come legally. The problem is they're culturally incompatible with the United States. The United States is a high-trust society. We are as successful as we are because, generally speaking, if I sign a contract with you, Jeff, you're going to keep your word, you're going to follow the law, and if I get to a court, the court is going to uphold whoever was right. You know, that's kind of how our system has always worked. It's why, for the most part, we are not a third world country. We are able to be wealthy because we are able generally to trust. Somalia is the opposite. It is possibly the lowest trust society on the planet. So when these people come here, they don't know how to integrate into our society. They don't integrate into our society, and they continue the corrupt and thieving ways that are just natural from childhood where they came from. And that's what we're seeing in Minnesota. Now, the Democrats benefit from that because, look, they're electing people like Ilhan Omar. Mm-hmm. They are actually just completely taking advantage of a system that was designed to alleviate poverty and help people get back on their feet. And they're skimming fortunes off the top. The current estimate in Minnesota is $9 billion. Well, Minnesota's small. When you get to California, it's going to dwarf that. And this is what we found when we abolished USAID, which was the principal U.S. foreign aid agency. USAID had a bigger budget than the State Department and the CIA put together.
Rod, I get it. We're up against a break. We're talking to Rod Martin from Martin Capital and talking about the issues of the day. You're listening to Real Truth for Today. Pastor Jeff Schreve here. We'll be right back after the break.
Pastor Joseph Parker from Equipping the Church to Stand Boldly for Life.
10 excellent reasons to read God's Word daily. Number 1, it tells you genuinely how to be saved and how to grow up in your faith. Number 2, it gives you clear guidance and direction for much of your life. A third reason is it empowers your prayer life. Fourth, because it sharpens your ability to hear the Holy Spirit speak more and more clearly to you in your life. A fifth reason, God's Word ministers to your mind, body, and spirit. A sixth reason, it helps you maintain your mental health. Number 7, it increases God's anointing on every part of your life. Number 8, it increases your wisdom. A 9th reason, it enhances your intellect and your personality. And a 10th reason, it pours grace, peace, mercy, and joy into your spirit, your mind, and your life.
Find Pastor Joseph and many more excellent messages from the AFA Cultural Institute at stream.afa.net.
I would challenge and encourage you to consider starting a habit of reading at least 3 chapters in your Bible every day.
Jerusalem, oh Jerusalem, how many times I would have taken you under my wings. They had everything that was necessary for them to know Jesus and follow him, and they went their way.
I think for nations, for individuals, there is a day that you have to make the decision to respond to the Lord, and it might be that the door of opportunity after that shuts.
Exploring the Word, weekdays 3 p.m. Central on AFR.
Loneliness has reached epidemic proportions, even as the world's population continues to grow. But there's good news. God has a solution. This week on Pathway to Victory, Dr. Robert Jeffress teaches us how to choose companionship and intimacy with God. Join us for the series, Choose Your Attitudes, Change Your Life, on Pathway to Victory.
Weekday mornings at 6 Central on American Family Radio.
Candace talks about finding out she was pregnant. Thankfully, an ultrasound provided by Preborn allowed her to hear her baby's heartbeat.
The sonogram sealed the deal for me. My baby was like this tiny little spectrum of hope. And I saw his heart beating on the screen. And knowing that there's life growing inside, I mean, that sonogram changed my life. I went from just Candace to mom. Thank you to everybody that has given these gifts. You guys are giving more than money. You guys are giving love.
Preborn currently has clinics that do not have ultrasound machines. Would you consider a leadership gift and sponsor a machine today? These life-saving machines cost $15,000, more than most centers can afford. Your donation will save countless lives for years to come. Dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby, or go to preborn.com/AFR.
This is Real Truth for Today. Podcasts of the program are available on the podcast page at afr.net. Now, back to Pastor Jeff Schreve.
Welcome back to the program. Pastor Jeff here. I'm talking to Rod Martin, the president and founder of Martin Capital. And Rod has a great finger on the pulse of what's going on in America, what's going on in the world, especially with geopolitical things. But Rod, just to finish up, I think many people, many of our listeners, they're upset that they don't see more people get arrested and the teeth to the law when we see all this fraud taking place. I've stated that even a buffoon, he calls himself a knucklehead by his own admission, like Tim Walz. No one can be that stupid to know that this fraud is taking place and just say, I didn't know how to manage it. I mean, he knew it was going on. They just wanted it to continue, evidently.
Yeah, Waltz is a lot dumber than you are, but that doesn't mean he's dumb. You know, this guy knows what he's presiding over. He knows what he's doing, and he knows that this stuff went a lot of places it wasn't supposed to go. Right before the break, I was talking about USAID, which, of course, was America's principal foreign aid agency for many years. It was started by JFK. And, Trump famously shut it down in February of last year. It had a bigger budget than the State Department and the CIA combined. And when we got into it, we found that, contrary to all of the paeans to its glory, it wasn't doing a lot of relieving hunger or poverty anywhere. It was sponsoring revolutions in foreign countries, coups d'etat. It was forcibly sterilizing 300,000 native women in South America. And there's a lot of evidence that it was directly or indirectly funding key parts of the domestic media here in the United States when that media would do things to attack Republicans. So it's a domestic influence operation paid for with your tax dollars, could not possibly be more corrupt. And a lot of us said, when you train a large number of professionals and fund them with taxpayer dollars for the purpose of being able to overthrow foreign governments, at some point they might get together and want to overthrow ours. Or do some of the things that they would do in those other settings to help their party get their way. And that's absolutely what was happening at USAID. It was the most corrupt part of the United States government by far. Well, okay, the kind of people who will do that, did I mention forcibly sterilizing 300,000 native women in Latin America? The kind of people who will do that sort of thing will do pretty much anything, and they get used to the skim. So, for instance, one of the first things that happened when the Trump administration took over the EPA was we found that the EPA had spent the 2 months between Trump's election and inauguration handing out shockingly huge grants to all of their buddies. They actually gave Stacey Abrams, who you'll recall was the failed candidate for governor in Georgia, they gave Stacey Abrams $2 billion for a brand new environmental NGO that hadn't ever existed before. They just, has no operating track record. Stacey has zero experience in anything environmental. And the EPA just hands her $2 billion. Because they started handing all the key Democrats whatever wasn't nailed down. We saw the same thing in Arkansas, you may recall, in the 90s when term limits came in, and all these good old boy Democrats who had been chairman of this and that Senate and House committee in Little Rock for decades just stole everything that wasn't nailed down. And it turned out that a bunch, like a large percentage of the Arkansas state legislature got indicted and went to prison because they steal. Okay, if you're a Marxist, you believe that the current owners of all property are illegitimate owners. You believe that everything ought to belong to the state. When you add that layer of socialism that they're now trumpeting, you can't avoid that they're going to redistribute wealth, and they're not going to wait for your permission. And that's what we're seeing in Minnesota. And to address the prosecution's issue, last count I saw, we've actually indicted and prosecuted more than 80 people in the Minnesota situation. So that there are ongoing things. They're not the big fish like the governor yet, or Keith Ellison, who's the attorney general. Hope that happens, actually, but you got to build a case. And you saw this, actually, I mentioned The Godfather earlier, but you've seen The Godfather Part 2. And, you know, the government is trying to build the case against the mafia, trying to take down Michael Corleone, and to do it, they have to go after all these little fish and get somebody to talk about their boss. And that's a lot of what's happening here. The other thing that's happening here, and I want to encourage your viewers, is that it takes a lot of time to build an ironclad case, and we've got venues in this country that pretty much just hang Republicans and let Democrats walk. Right. And, you know, particularly in D.C., and there are a handful of other jurisdictions like that. So if you're going to bring a case, it better be flawless. The second thing is bandwidth. There are only so many prosecutors. There are only so many investigators. And we saw this with Alligator Alcatraz. Everybody, you know, thought that was just Trump either being cute or fascist or whatever. No, it was solving a very specific problem. We've got jail space if we want to put illegal aliens in jail. That's not what we want to do. We want to hold them long enough in one place that we can get them in front of an immigration judge to rule on whether they should be here or not. And in the Alligator Alcatraz case, you actually have a runway right there beside the facility. So if the immigration judge rules that they ought to be deported, they're put immediately on a plane and flown out of the country. It's a bandwidth problem. If you don't have enough bandwidth in your internet in your house, your streaming doesn't work. You can't watch Landman or whatever TV show you want. And the same thing is true in the judicial process. The Trump administration is ramping up the bandwidth to be able to deal with an historically all-time high level of fraud, and it's going to take a minute.
Rod, with the midterms coming up very, very soon, if things get flipped, does Trump's whole agenda get derailed?
A large part of it. We saw how this played out in 2019. The president was still able to do quite a few things. It's remarkable how creative Donald Trump is. But, and of course, foreign policy, he's got a lot of room to maneuver. However, what he'll end up doing if the Democrats take all or part of Congress is he will spend his last 2 years in office fighting off one or more impeachment attempts. And, you know, he's not going to be able to get health care reformed. He's not going to be able to get any of the things that we're hoping to see. And so this year is crucial in multiple ways. First, he's got to get as much of his agenda passed as possible now. Second, we've got to get the SAVE Act passed. Only American citizens who can show a proper ID should be voting. And don't give me all this stuff about how, oh, poor black people can't afford to get a voter ID. We'll give them one. In Florida, we literally give you a photo ID if you can't afford it. So that's just hooey. Of course we can solve that problem. And nearly every country on earth has voter ID requirements for their elections. So we got to pass the SAVE Act, and we got to turn this economy around. Now, I say that loosely because the truth is the economy's roaring. We've now had several quarters of over 5% GDP growth, which is staggering. That's really a big deal. The average in the Obama years was 1.6. That's just phenomenal growth we're seeing, but it isn't necessarily reaching everybody yet. It's my prediction, along with friends of mine like George Gilder and Stephen Moore and others, we believe that this economy is going to be roaring in a way that no one can deny by about the middle of the summer. And I think that produces a tremendous, tremendous outpouring for the Republicans in November if it really happens. One last thing, we really have to complete the redistricting process. The Democrats have gerrymandered all of their states ridiculously, again, giving themselves an unfair advantage in Congress. We can either play to be nice or we can play to win, and the country's in the balance.
Rod, as far as the economy roaring, is that a direct result of the tariffs?
The tariffs play an interesting role. I mean, if you look at tariffs in isolation, they kind of function as a tax either on the consumer or on the company, depending on how the company chooses to pass along the cost or not. For the most part, what we've seen since Trump's Liberation Day last April is that the foreign companies affected by tariffs have mostly just eaten the tariffs. And so what that does is it eats into their profit margin, makes it less profitable to export into the United States. So what do? Well, that's where that $18 trillion in new foreign investment into the United States comes in. That is an unprecedented number, and by the way, that's like 2/3 of the entire size of the American economy. It's just staggering. And you're starting to see plants built, and you're starting to see great jobs created. So the more you incentivize production here in the United States, the more of it you get, the more you create those good middle class jobs we used to have for people who didn't go to college and get a gender studies degree. And everything gets better for everybody. Everybody gets brought along, not just the bi-coastal elites. So that's the biggest thing the tariffs do. They encourage foreign countries to avoid the tariffs by bringing manufacturing to the United States. And the deal Trump has made for most of these cases is if you're doing a good faith effort to begin manufacturing in the United States, we also won't tariff what you send from overseas. But if you stop having a good faith effort, we're going to smack you. And of course, Trump always does smack you.
Well, I've stated this before, Rod. Trump is he's very upfront. He tells you what he's going to do. And then, hey, if you don't do X, I'm going to do Y. And then he does Y. And then people freak out. And it's like, I told you I was going to do that. He really does, in my opinion, he really does follow through on campaign promises. People can say what they want and ding him on the way he says things. But as far as what he does, I believe that he does what is in the best interests of America and Americans.
I believe so. I think it's been a phenomenal presidency both times. He kept more campaign promises in the first term than anybody I ever saw in office, and I've been around a while. I mean, it was just remarkable because, of course, the knock on Trump in the Republican primary, which lots of people made. I mean, I was for Ted Cruz after I was for Mike Huckabee, and I didn't want Trump. And the knock on him was, I don't know if we can trust him.
Right.
I don't know if he even believes any of this stuff he's saying, and I certainly don't know if he'll be able to figure out how to do any of it once he gets to Washington, having never been elected to anything. Well, it turned out all three of those things were wrongheaded. He absolutely kept his promises in some ways better than he needed to. I mean, really kind of letter of the law. I said X, you're getting X, even when it hurt him. One of those cases was the attempt to repeal Obamacare. Any other president in my lifetime or yours would have stopped after Congress defeated his first attempt to overturn Obamacare. Trump brought it back to Congress 2 more times the same year. I mean, it's just unheard of. Reagan wouldn't have done that. Clinton wouldn't have done that. Nobody does that. Trump kept fighting for it. And until he was finally just outright betrayed by John McCain, who had himself run on a promise to overturn Obamacare and then voted with the Democrats to thwart Trump, until that happened, and then we lost the midterms, Trump just kept fighting for it. So it's remarkable how much he has kept his word, and it has worked out really well. I mean, we had a huge boom in the first 3 years of the Trump presidency. Then we had COVID, which is just an outlier. And we're seeing that boom gather again. We're seeing, in the first term, he promised that he would overturn 2 federal regulations for every 1 new one. He ended up getting rid of more than 20 old regulations for every 1 new one. In this second term, he promised he would get rid of 10 federal regulations for every 1 new one. He's actually gone over 100 to 1. He's really committed to reducing the power of an overbloated federal government. He's successfully gotten rid of almost 500,000 federal employees that we never should have had. He's meaningfully cut waste and fraud. The tariff revenue is helping reduce the deficit, and we meaningfully cut federal spending in the big, beautiful bill. So all of this is coordinated. It's all moving in the same direction. We can get to a point where government is much more constrained, and your tax burden is much more bearable. It's just an extraordinary thing to see. And of course, did I mention he got Roe v. Wade overturned? Because that was kind of my big thing.
Well, we're talking to Rod Martin, the president and founder of Martin Capital, and you're listening to Real Truth for Today. Pastor Jeff Schreve here, your host. When we come back from the break, we'll be taking your calls, 888-589-8840. That's 888-589-8840. If you have a question for Rod, a comment, we would love to hear from you. And Rod, I know I have questions floating around in my head when we come back from the break. I can't ask you now. We're too close to the break time. But I want you to be thinking about Ronald Reagan versus Donald Trump. Who would you choose? You're listening to Real Truth for Today. We'll be right back after the break. Give us a call and let's talk.
If we lose this cultural war, we're going to have a hedonistic, humanistic society.
Discover the story of the culture warrior Don Wildman and how he went head-to-head with Hollywood, Playboy, the homosexual agenda, and the Disney empire. The movement Don started paved the way for Christians to boldly stand for truth and righteousness in a hostile culture. Watch Culture Warrior today for free. Visit culturewarrior.movie.
AFA Stream is a resource for life-changing instruction and information, a source of wholesome entertainment and relaxation, plus access to some of your favorite AFA shows. You can watch a lot of content for free, or you can become a Great Commission partner. Then you'll not only open the door to everything AFA Stream has to offer, you'll get benefits like a subscription to The Stand and some really nice exclusives. Why not get started today? It's easy. Visit stream.afa.net.
People in sales training are taught that everything leads to one thing, the ask. A salesman has to ask a customer if he will make a decision to purchase the product or make the investment or give the gift. And the same is true in Christian evangelism. We must ask the non-Christian if he will make a decision to trust Christ. A young preacher once asked Charles Spurgeon why he, the young preacher, saw no results from his preaching. Spurgeon replied, "You must preach for a verdict. If you share the gospel with someone, don't fail to ask them for a decision for Christ." This is David Jeremiah, encouraging you to get on the road to new life and discover God's purpose in evangelism on Route 66.
Route 66, driving the word home. Log on to Route66Life.com and get your roadmap for life. That's Route66Life.com. Route 66. Start your journey home today.
When you hear the letters AFR, there are a lot of things that could come to mind.
Automotive Finder's Resource, Alligator Frying Research, or the Association of Flying Rednecks. All great organizations, no doubt, but we hope the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear AFR is American Family Radio, a listener-supported network dedicated to sharing the gospel and promoting godly values.
God expects maturity in us. We should not be comfortable living with habitual sins.
So that's a news cycle item. Is it the top news story to God? No, because he warned us about all of this.
Now, I don't care how nice you think you are. If you're not telling someone the truth, you're not being loving to them.
Make no mistake, we're not anglers from Red Bay, but we are AFR, American Family Radio, and we're happy you're listening. If you'd like to contact Pastor Jeff, email pastorjeff@fromhisheart.org. Now, back to Real Truth for Today with Pastor Jeff Schreve.
Welcome back to the program. Pastor Jeff here. As is our practice, we like to open up the phone lines in the last segment to hear from our listeners, 888-589-8840. Rod is still with us, so if you have a question for Rod, we'd love to take it. Rod, okay, so if you pull out your crystal ball, one of the things that I think lots of people get concerned about is when we see these protests, when we see how these Minnesotans are dealing with ICE agents and we see people getting shot, it's really, in my estimation, it's surprising that we haven't seen more people get shot. You just don't come after a law enforcement, a guy carrying a gun that has the authority to shoot you if you come at him. Those guys have exhibited restraint, in my opinion, although not 100%. Do you think we're on the verge of a civil war?
I think there are elements among the protesters and some of their funders who would like to provoke one. And that is not speculative anymore, because you may have seen that we've gotten access to the chat thread of the Minnesota signal group that's been coordinating all of this. And they're very, very clear. They are training these people to get as confrontational with the police as possible for the purpose of provoking an overreaction. They're trying to get these guys to kill somebody. They're trying to get these guys to use brutality in a way that will spark a revolution. And those are the words they're using. You know, this isn't my interpretation of it. This is what they're saying. And that's actually subject to the Insurrection Act. That's actually criminal on every possible level. So I think ICE has been shockingly restrained. ICE has killed many fewer people during the Trump administration than it did under Obama. And this part gets missed too. If you are in law enforcement, you are in constant threat of danger at every moment of every day. And you have rules by which you may use force, and we up to and including deadly force, to protect yourself and to stop people from resisting arrest. We may not like that. The specific results on a particular camera angle may look bad, but that's normal law enforcement. And ICE has actually done an incredible job in Minnesota, considering what it's facing, this organized resistance trying to provoke it to act wrongly,
right? And
it hasn't. You can argue about one or two specific cases, but that's all you can argue about, and that is the miracle, just like you were saying. You know, they're trying to provoke 20, 30, 50, 100, and they aren't getting there.
Right. That's for sure. Well, we're going to the phone lines, 888-589-8840. We have David on the line from Iowa. David, welcome to Real Truth for Today.
Hey, thanks, guys, for taking my call. First of all, I want to say thank you for common sense that you guys are putting out over the airwaves. Second, I want to say thank you to all the ICE agents out there. I mean, we, out of hundreds of thousands of incidents, maybe millions even, you get one every now and then that doesn't go right. I mean, the success rate is phenomenal. So thank you, ICE agents, for the job that you do.
Yes.
The next thing, I'll go quickly here. The economy, Rod, you said you think it's going to go take off in the second or the middle of this year. I'm a truck driver. I see the trucks on the road in the stops at night. It's growing. All right. I can see things are getting bigger or getting busier. And my last question quickly for you, Rod, is with gold and silver going up, is that a result of the inflation? I'm not an economist, but I think it is. And how long will it take for wages and those types of things to catch up with the inflation? Because that's when things are really going to change for the guy on the street. I appreciate your time, guys.
Hey, thank you. And look, last question first. Wage growth is already running ahead of inflation for the first time in 4 years. So we're already seeing the turnaround, and it's meaningful. Now, over a period of time, that gets to be a really big deal, even if it just stays as it is. But it's not going to stay as it is. You're going to see a significant pickup in good jobs, first in construction for all these new plants and data centers and so forth, and then in those plants and data centers, and that's going to just spread out across the whole economy. And I mean, $18 trillion in investment is just staggering. Nobody can wrap their brain around just how big a deal that is, and it touches everything. It's not just AI data centers, it's shipbuilding in Philadelphia, it's car plants, it's chip makers in Arizona. It's all this incredible stuff all across the economy. You're also going to see housing come down as there are fewer and fewer illegal aliens. And we're beginning to see that now with 2.5 million of them gone. So the other question was about gold. Look, be careful trading gold. You can certainly hold gold, and I'm for that. And you can hold silver, and I'm for that. But be careful trading it, because the central banks are the big player in that, and they move according to their own timing and terms, and you can't make sense of it as a layperson. So you can really get hurt trading metals, but you can do really well holding metals. And my estimation is this isn't really as much a response to inflation per se as a general shift we've seen over the last 5 years, even longer, in central bank thinking. They've been acquiring an awful lot of bullion, and you see it around the world. And I think there's a decent chance we could move toward a system, probably not to a system, but toward a system that is much more rooted in sound money than the one we've been experiencing since Nixon closed the gold window in 1971. So I think it's a very positive development overall, and we'll see where it goes, but I'm encouraged.
Very good. Thank you, David. I appreciate the call. We have Steve on the line from Oklahoma. Steve, welcome to Real Truth for Today.
Hi, Pastor Jeff. You need to have this gentleman, Rod, on like once a week. I've heard him before. I get so fired up when I hear him talk. He just has all his facts organized. I wanted to make a comment about Reagan versus Trump. You know, in 1980, I was 18 years old. I voted for Ronald Reagan because my dad thought that'd be a good idea. And my dad had recently, before 1980, had converted from a Democrat to a Republican. And I'd probably watched every documentary on Ronald Reagan. I think what we're going to see as we look back on this era, maybe 20, 30 years from now, is that we've got to start electing people to high office that have business background. Donald Trump, even though I don't agree with a lot of things that go on in his personal life, he has built a business empire, and he's brought that business acumen, and he knows capitalism. I mean, everybody just thought he was wrong on tariffs, and they were wrong. And, you know, I loved what Rod was talking about, how wage growth is got to be above inflation to really expand the economy. Trump knows all of this. And we've got to stop hiring, electing politicians that don't know anything about business. So I think that's the difference. I mean, I liked Ronald Reagan, and he was good for the country. He loved America. He was a patriot. So is Donald Trump. But we've got to get people in there. When Trump saw that USAID and the waste and the fraud and the abuse, he shut it down. And I'm wondering now that's maybe why we have this accumulation of $37 trillion in debt. A lot of this excess that we have in this debt is that we're just giving money to people that we're just throwing it away.
Very good, Steve. Okay, so business acumen. You know, Rod, one of the things Trump is known as not to read a lot. I don't know where he gets so much knowledge about things. I guess it's just from doing it. But typically, guys that are very wise have read a lot. And so where does Trump get all his business acumen?
The idea that he doesn't read is sort of the other side's propaganda. Is it true that he's not reading the same books that Paul Krugman is reading late at night? Yes, that's absolutely true. But is he reading? Yes, voraciously, unending news and government reports. And he's just an information hoover. And you have to be in the business he was in all those years. You have to know every minute detail of everything that affects your business, which goes far beyond construction or permitting or something like that. That's always who he's been. So, you're talking about Reagan versus Trump. You know, Reagan was unquestionably the greatest president of the 20th century, absolutely bar none. We went from a period for the 40 years before Reagan in which we had a recession on average every 2.5 years. Reagan gave us a new economic era in which we have had 4 recessions in 40 years. That's just unheard of. That's never happened before. Reagan unleashed the power of retirement accounts to create real shareholder wealth for normal people. Reagan won the Cold War, for heaven's sake. And people just assume that's inevitable now in retrospect. No, it wasn't inevitable at all. What was about to be inevitable if Carter had been reelected was it looked like the Soviets were probably going to win the Cold War. And that's worthy of an entire show all by itself. Right. But what Trump did, and it's become quite remarkable to me, and I've written a lot about this, and I'm going to be writing about this in a book that's going to be out reasonably soon, is the degree to which Trump learned from Reagan. And again, that we could talk about that at book length, but I'll just say this one thing. Trump learned from Reagan that the experts believe that our enemies are stronger than us, and they're usually wrong. Reagan understood the strength of the American economy and the American spirit and America's geographical advantages and all the different things that made America great. And Trump imbibed that deeply. And that's why you get the approach he has taken that is so different from the establishment preceding him, where we just assume China needs the American consumer market. China can't function without it. So we hit them with tariffs, and lo and behold, we're getting a trade deal. Europe needs America more than America needs Europe. So sure enough, we get a trade deal and we get new commitments on their defense spending. Same thing with Britain. 2 days ago, India has made a trade deal with the United States. We're going to charge them 18% tariffs, which is what we were doing, before the recent round of fighting. And they're going to charge us 0%. Zero. Why? Because Donald Trump understands that access to the U.S. consumer market is unique and irreplaceable, and there's nowhere else these countries can go. Reagan understood that. Trump understands that. It makes for a very different foreign policy. And in both presidencies, it makes the establishment completely freak out and say the guy's an idiot. Guess what? He isn't. You are.
Right. Boy, we got the phone lines all lit up, but we're running out of time. Let me just hit on some of these. Karen from Arkansas said, asked the question, are the daycare fraud people in Minnesota still getting money?
Some of them clearly are. The Walz administration just keeps going. That's going to get shut down. It's a bandwidth problem. Like we were talking about earlier, you only have so many investigators to go around, and the state of Minnesota isn't really cooperating. But will we get them? Will we shut them down? Absolutely. There will be no more luring centers when this is over.
Right. Okay, Tom in Tennessee asks, what is J.D. Vance's stance on the abortion pill? Do you know?
You know, I'm not entirely clear on that. I can tell you mine. It's a no-brainer that if my state bans the abortion pill, that law should stand, and the FDA should not be able to override it. I think that's the consensus in the Republican Party. I think that's where we're headed. I don't know JD's personal stance on that, and I'm not sure that it's really knowable, but I think that's where he's going to end up.
All right. One last question. This is from Trey in Texas. Kirk Franklin said that Jesus and his parents were immigrants. Should we be looking at these people differently? Obviously, Jesus and his parents weren't immigrants. They lived under the Roman Empire. You go from one state to another. If I flee from Texas to go to Arkansas, I'm not a refugee.
So Isn't that the truth?
You got 30 seconds, Rod. What would you say? Should we look at these people
differently? Yeah, that's
differently?
exactly right. I mean, this is just twisting Scripture. You know, it's like so many things that the critical theory types want to do to get the Bible to back things that the Bible opposes. You know, the truth of Scripture is we have a whole book about a guy God sent to build a wall.
Rod, we're out of time. We've been listening to Rod Martin. Thank you for listening today. God bless you.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not